Hello, fellow entrepreneurs. We are so glad to be here together with entrepreneurship in this 2020 global virtual event. We are Vote Pilipinas, and we are an information campaign on voters registration and exercising your right to vote. So hopefully at the end of this presentation or at the end of this session, you will be informed of how big of a difference your vote can make. So first off, let me introduce myself. I'm Feliz Axalan. I'm the Vote Filipinas Partnerships Representative. We are a 100% volunteer-run organization, and maybe at the end of this workshop, you'll be enticed to become one of our volunteers too. So before I formally introduce to you what Vote Filipinas is, who we are, and what we do, why did we come here? Why are we here? Let's go back in time. In May 2019 elections in the Philippines, there was a total voter turnout of 46.9 million out of 61.8 million, or 75.9% voted in total during the midterm senatorial election. Largest voter turnout was 80.93% came from Region 1, Ilocos, and the smallest voter turnout is 69.47, which came from NCR, which is very surprising. So the age demographic of voters in 2019, majority of it is coming from the 30 to 44 age bracket, which comprises 32% of the voters turnout, followed by the youth, which is 18 to 29 age bracket, which is 31%. So in May 2019, for the overseas and absentee voting voter turnout, there was only 18.6% or 334,000 out of 1.8 million registered voters who turned out for the midterm elections, majority of which are coming from the Middle East and Africa, which is 36.2%, followed by Asia Pacific, 33.8%, and Americas at 16.4%, with the least from Europe at 13.6%. So for comparison, let's just go back to the May 2016 presidential elections for overseas and absentee voting. Voter turnout was much bigger compared to the 2019 midterm elections, which is at 31.5% or 430,000 out of 1.3 million registered voters at that time. It's usually expected that there's an even bigger turnout for presidential elections compared to the midterm elections. In 2016, Foreign Undersecretary Rafael Seguis once described OFW voters as game changers in Philippine politics. If you actually look at the statistics for the 2016 presidential elections and look at the vice presidential race, there is only a difference of about 100,000 to 150,000 votes between the two top vice presidential nominees. See how much of a difference every person can make. And it's actually the same as with the senatorial elections and the midterm elections. Some people only vote during the presidential election thinking that it's what makes a whole lot of difference, but the lawmakers also make a whole lot of difference. So being able to exercise your right to vote, not just during the presidential elections, but in all elections in general, would make such a huge difference. If you also look back on the senatorial elections last time, the last two seats only had a difference of about 100,000 votes to the last two who weren't able to make it. And actually, this is how we can see that not voting from the 2019 can also affect the lives of the Filipinos. Work, education, livelihood, economic position, and even religion. Some may be in minor forms, others drastically. So think about the jeepney drivers who could have lost their entire livelihood because of the jeepney modernization program imposed by the government, or a teacher having to find the finances to pay for resources and modules for her students, or even the internet to access and have distance learning. A recently graduated high school student who must pick between pursuing a college education or working to provide for their family, or a farm far from the city or a major barrio having to make ends meet daily only to be possibly exploited by the owners of his land. Every single Filipino experiencing this pandemic is also experiencing the impact of what has happened during the previous elections. This is why every vote counts. This is why every Filipino should be afforded the right to register, to access understandable information about their candidates, and most especially to be able to exercise their right to vote. If you are residing outside the Philippines, maybe you're wondering, how can voting affect you? Remember that the government fights for your protection and rights, and that they can also provide aid to repatriated Filipinos and OFWs. Diplomacy also affects relationships between countries. By exercising your right to vote, you are putting leaders in power who can actually make an impact on these, especially to our brothers and sisters who are living outside the country. So before we continue on, let us show you a short video that we released during the launch of the campaign. So given the past elections and how every vote can actually impact the lives of Filipinos, that is why Vote Pilipinas came about. So who are we and what do we do? Vote Pilipinas is an innovative information campaign which aims to encourage Filipinos, especially the young people, to register and vote. To be primarily activated in social media platform and online through our website, it is a one-stop source of innovative, visual, and user-friendly information about all there is to know about voters registration and the Philippine elections. Our main objectives is, of course, to encourage Filipinos and increase the number of registered voters come elections in 2022, as well as provide everybody with relevant and unbiased, non-partisan, emphasis on that, information, data, and news about the upcoming voters registration. Our main goal is to have a 10% increase in number of registered voters. So if there are 61.8 million registered voters, our target increase by 2022 is to have 7 more million registered voters. And if you can see, as mentioned before, 2016 voter turnout was much bigger compared to the 2019 midterm elections. And we hope to have an even better target voter turnout in 2022. As we believe that every vote matters, we want to provide Filipinos the access to right information and empower them to make informed decisions as they cast their votes for the upcoming 2022 elections. So Vote Pilipinas also came about in support of one of the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. We believe that the act of voting and appointing government officials is a right afforded to every citizen once they turn 18, and they have the power to make their voices heard just by going through the process of registering. At the same time, being able to practice your right to vote means that you're putting leaders in position who can make a huge impact in the well-being of every citizen in the Philippines. So how do we plan to execute the Vote Pilipinas campaign? We know it's a little bit difficult now because of COVID and the pandemic, and unfortunately everything is still manually done. Still manual labor to be able to register to vote, but this is where we come in. This is where we try to help to make it easier for everybody who has not registered yet to have access to information that would really help them. Our main objectives for the campaign is to leverage on technology and support in simplifying the registration process and communication efforts of the COMELEC. We also provide Filipinos with relevant and unbiased, non-partisan information, data, and news about the upcoming voters registration, and to encourage Filipinos and increase the numbers of registered voters for the 2022 elections. So just to give you a timeline, in August 2020, we launched officially together with Impact Hub Manila, who spearheaded this campaign. And they launched this during the hackathon in 2020, last August. And together with that, we are continuing until September 2021. At the end of September, that's the deadline for voters registration. From here on until then, that's when we are going to campaign for voters or for registration of voters. And throughout, after that, it's now our campaign. It's going to be then our campaign to make people really go out there and vote. And the entire time duration, we're hoping to do offline campaigns too. Maybe after this whole COVID thing will be over. But for now, we are maximizing our online campaigns. So our target market are the new voters or the youth, especially those who are turning 18 before the 2022 elections. Unregistered voters, there are still a lot of them. And of course, PWDs and the elderly, or those who are in high need of assistance for registration. Also the OFWs and diaspora community, because we believe that you can make a huge difference. And of course, the indigenous communities in the Philippines. So for our campaign activation, at the moment, we are only doing online. So through our website, through social media platforms, we launch during the hackathon, and we also do town hall or live events virtually. So recently, we actually partnered with youth organizations during the Philippine Festival on Youth Action, and now we are partnering with Entrepreneurship for this 2020 global virtual event to be able to reach out to more people about the campaign. Hopefully after COVID-19, or when things get back to normal and when people are not fearing to go out more, then we will be activating ourselves as well offline in the COMELEC official offices, in our programs, and our mobile activations in terms of for the registration of the PWDs, and of course giving out merchandise from our partners. So one of the most distinguishing parts of the campaign is actually our website. We aim for it to be the one-stop shop for all information that you need for voters registration. If you are planning still to register to vote, you will be able to find here where you can file your or submit your application for voting. At the same time, all the requirements that you need, and for those who may want a little refresher on the branches of government, you can also find information there. In the future, we'll be adding more articles about the upcoming voters registration, about the election for 2022 and whatnot. And we hope to actually launch in the future a sort of questionnaire wherein it will just ask you 5 to 6 questions about where you are, if you're a registered voter, if you're a PWD, and at the end of the questionnaire, it's just going to give you basically where you should be able to file your application or registration for voting. At the same time, what are the requirements that you need to bring, and if there is any regulation in terms of wearing a face mask or a face shield. And I think in the future we'll be able to give access to those who would like to also book an appointment to be able to register, because at the moment, especially in the Philippines, there is a lot of offices that have quota per day on the number of applicants that they can accept within the day. And hopefully we'll be able to roll that out either end of the year or the start of 2021. So we are very much present all over social media. We have our Facebook page, our Instagram, and also our Twitter. We are also in Kumu, and maybe in the future, because COMELEC has also mentioned the use of TikTok, we might also consider being there. So as a first step, we usually ask everyone who have heard about Vote Pilipinas to follow us on our social media platforms, and you're very much free to share all the content that we have regarding voters registration and our voters campaigns. Another thing is that since we are 100% volunteer-run organization. We also value the feedback of everyone. If you have any feedback regarding the content in our social media, we'd be happy to have it. If you have any ideas of what else we can post or what else we can promote over our social media platforms, that would be great. We had viral post the other, I think 2 months ago. It was riding on the trend of the game Among Us, and it said, voters, there are 8.5 million unregistered voters among us. And we use the thumb or the fingers as the avatars instead of the usual astronauts, and it reached an organic reach of 1.5 million people, because at the moment Facebook does not allow advertisements for political pages, but ideas like that we really value because we know that it's going to make a whole lot of difference and it's going to reach a whole lot more people, especially the youth. All right, so for the most important part, how to actually register to vote. So if you are an overseas voter or an absentee voter, you can contact your nearest Philippine embassy or consulate general for their schedule of voters registration. The requirements are pretty simple. You just need to bring a copy of your valid passport, or in the absence of a passport, you can also present an original birth certificate issued by the PSA, or you can also bring an original and a copy of any of your valid Philippine government issued IDs, such as driver's license, GSIS, and whatnot. If you are a dual citizen, you're also requested to bring in a copy of your dual citizenship or proof of any Philippine citizenship from the Bureau of Immigration. Now, if you're unsure of where exactly you can register from where you are, you can go to our website, votepilipinas.com, answer the 5 questionnaire, and it will show you at the end which will be the nearest COMELEC office or the nearest embassy or consulate general in which you can lodge your application. So of course, a campaign cannot be successful unless we spread the word. And one of the ways that we encourage people to actually spread the word is to create a dialogue. We were able to find a very simple guide on headcount.org, which is another voters campaign based in the US, and they have tips on how we can talk to friends and family about voting. So I will also run through that a bit later on. And then, of course, if you have friends who are unsure about who to vote for, they are unsure about how their vote matters, in the simplest way, you can ask them if they have any SDGs in mind or if they have any advocacy in mind that they care about, that matters to them, and they can base their decisions once voting is allowed or during the 2022 elections on leaders who stand up for their beliefs. So here's just some guides on how to open a dialogue and talk to your friends and family about voting, because most of the time it can be frustrating, it can be irritating, can also be disappointing, but we should fight for it if you really want your friends and family to register to vote and practice their right to vote. Most of the time what they say is that I don't like any of the candidates. And how you can respond to that is that I do get you, I hear you. Can be tough to find a politician to completely agree with or relate to, but let them understand that they're not voting friends. They're not voting for personalities. They're actually voting for policies. And they have to check out the positions and vote for the ideas that are closest to them. Like I mentioned, if they have any advocacy or if something matters to them and they know that a certain leader might have, or they may have forgotten, they may have overlooked them, might be, standing up for that particular advocacy or issue, then you can tell them more about that. It's also not just the candidates on the ballot, it's also the policies that they wish to push forward, the plans that they have. And like I said, it's not about them, it's about you as the voter. It's about you. Elections are all about standing up for the things that you most believe in. Another common excuse for not voting or not being enticed to vote is that they don't know any of the candidates. And this is one of the reasons why Vote Pilipinas was actually created, so that we can have like a website and an information campaign wherein you can find everything about all the nominees and who are the potential leaders of the future. So if in case they don't know any of the candidates, of course, they can Google it too if they want to know more. During the election day, they can also bring a cheat sheet because usually it's a little bit difficult to really, memorize all the names that you want to vote for. So bringing a cheat sheet is actually very good. Another reasoning that some people have is that politics just doesn't interest them. Usually these are the apathetic, they don't really care much, or they think that it doesn't really matter much to them, it doesn't affect them that much. You can tell them that, not voting is the #1 cause of unwanted leadership. And don't get stuck for 6 years, in our case in the Philippines, with leaders you had no say in choosing. You can put up leaders for adoption. Once they're there, they're there. And you'd be surprised. Think about, or tell them, think about that one thing that they care most about. And I bet you, I guarantee you that it was already affected by the previous elections, or it will also be affected by the upcoming election. And of course, do it for someone you love. You must have a friend or family member with whom this election they care deeply about. So if you support their beliefs, if you support them in principle, vote to have their back. Another common thing that they say is that it's rigged. They always cheat. And you can just tell them that, okay, I agree. It's frustrating that people cheat and they try to cheat, and even worse, they succeed. But you know what? We don't live in a perfect world. And that's all the more reason to make sure that you participate. Put up a fight. I mean, don't cheat yourself out of having a voice by letting crooked politicians own the system. Don't let them win. Just because you think that it's not a perfect world, cheating will always be there, doesn't mean you wouldn't be putting up a fight. Voting can actually unrig it. There are tons of ideas to reform democracy that never get anywhere because politicians think voters don't care. Not being a voter just proves them right. I mean, when the house is on fire, you're not just gonna stand outside and watch it burn, right? You really have to let the fire out. So the path to change isn't perfect. But if we give up, then it's really all over. Reform happens when people like us rise up. And that starts by registering to vote and practicing your right to vote. Now, this is one of the very valid concerns of those who haven't registered yet. Of course, they're concerned about COVID-19. Of course, we can't really, force people to go out there and register to vote when we have a lingering, unseen enemy out there, which is the coronavirus. But of course, we can always follow strict health regulations and safety. And if you actually ask the COMELEC, ever since they opened their voters registration in September 1, they have had 0 COVID cases in any of their offices, in any of the registered voters who actually went to the offices and came out. None of them have been reported so far in terms of infections. At the same time, they really make sure that they disinfect the entire area. So for example, in the Philippines, majority of the COMELEC offices have Fridays for disinfections, and this is why it kind of, reduced the number of days that you're allowed to actually register. Instead of having 5 days, now it's just reduced to 4 days just because of the disinfection. But this is how COMELEC is really helping people feel more secure that all health regulations are in place. There is an appointment that you need to book to be able to register. Everyone is required to wear face masks and face shields, and just practice the necessary health precautions to be able to register in the offices. And of course, most popular reasoning of why people don't vote or register to vote is because they think that their vote doesn't matter. Honestly, this was also me during the 2016 elections, and I deeply regret it. And this is why I'm also volunteering now with Vote Pilipinas. So people like me back then will believe that their vote really does matter and it can make such a huge impact. So when people say this, you can just tell them that I understand why it might feel that way. It can be hard to see our impact when millions of people are actually voting. But the truth is that every vote matters. It sounds corny, but there are so many ways that it does. And people wouldn't be spending too much money just to win in the elections, right? These campaigns aren't really bringing in all that money for nothing. And if you think that your vote doesn't matter, just look at what happened with the presidential election in 2016. There were only about 100,000 difference in terms of vote for the vice presidential race. In the US, actually, in 2017, exactly one vote determined the control of the Virginia state legislature. So tip the balance. The last presidential election, for example, in the US was decided by around just 100,000 votes. And in 2000, it was actually decided by just 537 votes. So imagine if we could encourage more people, millions of them, it can make a whole lot of difference. And of course, you can always show the politician who's the boss. Politicians listen to their most reliable voting blocs. And just know that your vote is your right and privilege. There are lots of people in the world who don't have any voice towards the government, and a lot of us have to fight for this right. And exercising it is an act of respect and service. So remember, when you open dialogues like this, you can also tell them that what matters most is that you register to vote for the future of the Philippines and for your future outside the Philippines as Filipino citizens. Best that you engage in an open and constructive manner, not too defensive, not always angry. Set aside your political affiliation or stances, whether abroad in the Philippines, and talk in a manner wherein they'll be more open to share with you and they'll be more encouraged to actually register and vote. And then, of course, the usual question, so what if I am abroad? Whether or not you realize it, as mentioned before, your decision to register will affect each and every OFW and Filipino residing outside of the Philippines in terms of how the government fights for your protection and your rights, and how diplomacy can affect the relationship between our countries, and of course, how the government provides aid to repatriated Filipinos and OFWs. And as shown in the initial video, the first video that we flashed before, think about the future generation and think about every Filipino that's being impacted by this. The government has the power to make decisions that involve indigenous land rights, environmental protection, and economic prosperity. So think about every single Filipino that will be affected by the upcoming election. Think about what your vote, you as a voter, can impact that. How can you contribute to this campaign? So you as an entrepreneur, you have your own businesses, you have your own enterprises. You can spread the word through your social media platform and be an advocate of Vote Pilipinas to encourage more people to register to vote and to practice their right to vote come 2022 elections. So social media is a very powerful tool. All the content that we have in our social media platform, you're very much free to share. Of course, start small within your community, within your close circle of friends, within your family. You can encourage them to register to vote. And then, of course, you can also collaborate like we did with entrepreneurship. If they have a specific event wherein you would like us to be there to answer all questions about voters registration, or at least hold a workshop about fighting for your right to vote, then you can collaborate on an event that promotes voters registration and exercising the right to vote. And as business owners or as leaders of your own communities, you can also give incentives for those who have already registered to vote and who will be voting in 2022. So that's pretty much it. If you want to work together with us, if you want to be a volunteer, or if you want to be a partner of Vote Pilipinas, you can definitely just drop us a message in any of our social media platforms or pages to find out how. You can just like or follow and share our social media pages to spread the word. You can also visit our website, votepilipinas.com, Again, we would like to remind you to register to vote, and if you have already registered, feel free to encourage more people to register and then practice your rights to vote in 2022. So with that, thank you so much for listening and happy voting.